Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for ThatShelf.com. We are here at the 2022 Cannes International Film Festival. I'm just walking to yet another film. This is how this all works. I want to tell a story. The first time I was here at Cannes, I was a student ostensibly studying French and not doing a very good job of it, in Aix-en-Provence. And I talked my way in, as one does, in the Cannes Film Festival. That's a whole nother long story, but I got here in a way I wasn't necessarily supposed to be attending. I actually ended up with a better badge than I probably should have ever had. But one of the most formative experiences I had was seeing David Cronenberg's Crash at the Grand Palais. I was up in the balcony, a place where I don't love so much, but these days I fought very hard to actually get orchestra access. That balcony I was there for, where when it played, about a quarter of the audience left as soon as Elias Koteas and James Spader started having sex. A quarter of the audience left. It was 96. Immediately afterwards, there's a lesbian scene. Everyone's totally fine with that. But when the film ended, there was this sound which it still resonates in my brain all these decades later. It was a mix of standing ovation and booing. And it lasted about 10 minutes. It was this cacophony of back and forth of people trying to outdo each other, sort of like a sporting competition. Which inevitably, this is a competition in Cannes, but the way that it sort of unfolded is that this is a film that completely split audiences, and people needed to let people know how they felt about it. It's very important. I actually saw ostensibly a fist fight on the top of the on the top of the red carpet. C'est pornographique, no, c'est philosophique. It was just remarkable. It just felt that movies mattered in a funny way. At this time where we have actual conflicts going on and people are actually suffering, it does seem incredibly trivial. But here within the bubble of Cannes, within this celebration, these palaces, these cathedrals of cinema, movies still have effect. They affect people. They absolutely move them in ways which, occasionally for me are quite remarkable. And whatever he does, whenever he makes a film, David Cronenberg affects you. Sometimes he affects you because he's so cold, sometimes because he's so hot, sometimes because he's too deep, sometimes it's because he's too silly. Whatever it is that he does it with a sense of force, of a caliber of talent, that even when they don't work for me, I never question the ability of the person who's actually putting those images on screen. He is, in the true sense, that way, that auteur, that sort of French ideal that we have, the person who's crafting the film. And I may not like every sculpture he makes. They simply might not work for me. But I absolutely applaud the skill, the energy, the drive. Every single frame feels like it's done on purpose. And he's one of those great directors. That's what truly makes him a great director. The last two films, Cosmopolis and Maps of the Stars, were simply not for me. And there are many people who will see this newest film, Crimes of the Future, which is premiering tonight. I had a chance to see it before Cannes. This will drop after its world premiere here at the festival. This film, many people say, is a return to form, which I call bullshit. This form never went anywhere. It's certainly, for me, a return to content. And the best way I've been able to describe it, as I've been thinking about it, because I've actually had more time to think about this stuff than usual. Normally, we have to have these reactions relatively quickly. Welcome to the new normal. But I've had now about a week and a bit to actually think about this film. And like many films that I've seen now at the competition, it's a film about storytelling. It's a film about narrative. It's a film about the lies that we tell each other to sort of get up in the morning and recognize, given our own mortality, how it all plays out. About what shapes us, about what affects us. All these sort of deep narratological elements. We see the same thing with George Miller. We see the same thing in numerous other films. But what we have here, in a fundamental way, is David Cronenberg's last two films, Maps of the Stars and Cosmopolis, were blue films. Visually, they were very blue. Aesthetically, they were blue. They were cold. They were distant. They were, in many ways, austere. They were about our fascination with celebrity. They were about just being distant and removed from any form of human contact. They were very, very blue films. And Crimes of the Future is very much a red film. It's back to him doing a red film. If you had to describe it, if you had to pitch, this is absolutely the unholy love child of Crash, Existence, and Dead Ringers. It has moments and elements of all that. Crash, Existence, and when you look at Dead Ringers, it's the medicalization of it all, not the twin stuff. There's other twins movies that take place here, but on a fundamental basis, it's about what we do for pleasure and what causes us pleasure, and do we need pain in order to have pleasure? Does the artist need to struggle in order actually to generate something? Is something that's actually drawn out on us? Is something that we actually grow within ourselves something that is helping us to evolve, helping us to better our future? Or is it merely something that's actually going to destroy us? Is it a cancer from within that, as we let it fester, will actually in the end completely leave us raw and writhing? These are the big questions of a Cronenberg film. He's paired again with Viggo Mortensen, who I think is a fantastic foil for the director. I think he's a really he's a great actor at the best of times, but he feels like a very Cronenbergian foil. If Scorsese has his De Niro, I think it's fair to say, other than something like Elias Koteas, who shows up in a bunch of stuff and there's a bunch of people, but nonetheless, I think Viggo, in terms of like a lead actor, that moment, those moments that he absolutely captures, the spirit, the wit, the light comedy underneath all the darkness of David Cronenberg, the literary sense, the fact that life is not simply black and white, that life is not simply highs and lows, but it's some awful, preposterous mash of everything in between. I think a lot of people will be unsettled. I mean, Cronenberg's on record saying, oh, there's going to be tons of walkouts. Of course he's going to say that. It's provocative, and he certainly says that with a little bit of a smirk. But the fact of the matter is that this is not going to be a film for everybody. That being said, a child of Cronenberg cinema, Titan, absolutely owes tons to Cronenberg's aesthetic. Won the Palme d'Or here last year. Do I think that the same recognition will be bestowed upon this celebrated Canadian again? Do I think that his film can actually take the top award? Again, not only do I not really fundamentally have any ability to predict any better than anyone else, but I don't. I think it'll be as divisive as anything, and who knows whether a jury will respond quite the same way. I don't think this is his masterpiece, but I think it's remarkable that it's a film that exists in the form that it does. I think it's fantastic when it is fantastic, and I think when it doesn't work, I still appreciate everything it is about that. I know that seems like faint praise, but it's not. It's the notion, again, that every single step feels like it is done with intention and purpose. And so many films here, so many films period, feel either the product of some sort of committee, some sort of like thing that you have to sort of plod through and actually set these various expectations. That can be anything from a Marvel movie to an art house movie. It doesn't really matter. But so many films feel like that they're sort of designed to hit the beats, and others that are so vague and so nonsensical, narratively, coherently, visually, that they leave so much open for interpretation for the audience, that the audience is doing all the heavy lifting. And I know so many critics that actually really respond to that. They're like, oh, now we have, I mean, subconsciously, but they're like, oh, now we have something to do. Now we have a film which is so relatively empty that we can fill in the gaps. We can write the essays. We can do the stuff. We now have space for us. We have narrative space for us to actually do this and accomplish this. So for me, this film, Crimes of the Future, is an art film, but it's also an entertainment. It is a deeply philosophical film, but it's also deeply silly. It's a film that has absolute moments of horror and lust and sexuality, but diminishes all of that. There are no sex scenes, and yet it's an incredibly sexual film. There are moments of absolute recognition that our fetishes drive what it is that we desire, but also a recognition that sometimes those fetishes are the cause of our own destruction. And as such, I think Crimes of the Future is a very, very, very compelling film. one that will find its audience, will find those that are open to what it has to say, will find those willing to take another chance on this absolute remarkable director. People want to know what a Cronenberg film is. It's like, by definition, it's like, what makes a Cronenberg film? And for me, it's unanswerable in a funny way, and yet there's still clearly a singular vision at the top of them. And if I had to sort of nail it into one thing, it's his insistence on that we look with open eyes, and that we see ourselves in these characters, even if they do things that are completely outside of our own experience, our own expectations, and our own proclivities. That even when somebody is doing something that seems completely contrary, completely non-human, it all sort of plays out. It all does its thing. I think with its connections to greater films, things like Existence, things like Dead Ringers, things like Crash, in his work, that maybe there will be people that will see this one and go backwards, or maybe there'll be an excuse for people to go back and rewatch those films. But I don't think this is some greatest hits package. This is not Cronenberg being back to being Cronenberg. He never stopped being Cronenberg. I think Crimes of the Future is a film of the present as much as it is a film of the past. And I think it speaks very much to the renewed vigor of this filmmaker, who took off a few years to write a book. That book is being channeled into another film, which is coming out. He's got more work coming. I think he's excited about movies again. And in a funny way, him actually seeking off and working in Greece and doing this co-production does give it a bigger canvas. I love that he shoots everything in Toronto. This film was meant to be shot in Toronto. COVID happened, financing happened, they got Viggo, then they go to Greece. And it gives it, again, a sort of a surrealism, but it also firmly echoes it more into European art cinema. And as such, it's that collision between these two worlds. I'm in France that beloves Cronenberg in a way that, frankly, in most of North America, other than a relatively esoteric bunch, we don't love him as much. Ever since The Fly, he hasn't had the kind of popular acceptance. Yes, History of Violence and Eastern Promises certainly found their audiences, but not in the way that somebody who was up for directing Top Gun and Flashdance and Return of the Jedi probably ever could have desired. The way that David Lynch has talked about is the way that I wish we talked about David Cronenberg. The way that David Lynch has talked about, not to take anything away from him, he's not my favorite filmmaker of all time, but he has a reverence, an absolute obsessive reverence in Lynch. As silly as him doing Weather on Twitter, he's this iconoclastic filmmaker that makes stuff that's weird for weird's sake. Cronenberg, I think, never does that, and that's what I love about him. When he gets the most bonkers, the most batshit, he is still conscious of having an audience, and it's that belief in me as an audience member that I'm going to be taken for a ride with him, with his guidance. Whatever that ride will be, it'll be truly exceptional. So, Crimes of the Future, congratulations, Mr. Cronenberg. I am ecstatic about your return to Cannes. I hope the audiences will respond favorably to your film, and I look forward to everything it is that you have coming out in the future. For ThatShelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on social media, and we will see you next movie. Take care.